He set the pattern by marrying the Persian princess Roxanne, and he encouraged his Macedonian soldiers to marry local women so that he could create simply one race. There would not be any ethnic divisions. Alexander encouraged and extended the use of the Greek language so that Greek became the common language. The term used is koine, meaning common, for the succeeding centuries. It remained the same language with some small changes, but fundamentally the same language for the next 1,500 years in the East. And finally, Alexander encouraged the practice of religious syncretism. Syncretism is a way of merging various gods, which is very easy in polytheistic systems. All polytheistic systems have families of gods. And Alexander's argument is that this is simply quibbling over names. Your Zeus is my Baal Shashamayim, the god of heaven. Let's not quibble over names. We're basically worshiping the same persons of a higher order who run the universe. So these systems could be regarded as functionally equivalent. And an important tool of Hellenization was syncretic religious practice. The ideal that Alexander sought was cosmopolitanism. It is the sense of being a citizen of the world that could derive from always having available the forms of Greek civilization. No matter where somebody traveled in that imperial world, they would find a Greek city-state. They would find the capacity to intermarry. They would speak Greek. They would study the classics. They would be worshiping the same gods. So the ideal was to be at home everywhere, to be a citizen of the world. The effect of empire, however, was unexpected and severe. Empire tended to distort the very values that Alexander sought to propagate. Hellenism is something quite other than ancient classical Athenian culture. To use an analogy, a franchise fast food restaurant which sells the same hamburgers without variation everywhere in the world, so you can walk into a McDonald's anywhere in Paris, in Moscow, anywhere, is something quite different than a mom-and-pop restaurant that makes the best hamburgers in the world. Well, the city-state of Athens made the best hamburgers in the world, but when you begin to franchise that across the empire, one of the things one loses is quality control. And another thing one loses is a sense of intense citizen participation, which was fundamental to the ancient city-state of Athens. But this sense of citizen participation is lost in empire and in its huge metropolises. The same thing is true of the Greek language. The Attic Greek of Athens underwent the influence of Semitic languages as it was extended, so that the Koine Greek of the empire is not exactly the same language as that used by Sophocles and Plato. Athenian culture was intensely local. Making it universal reduced its effect. Now, the part of the population that was most acutely affected by this effect were those middle members who traveled, traders, soldiers, and they realized that the flip side of cosmopolitanism is social alienation, or anomie. Those at the highest levels of the culture did not feel this effect so strongly because for those who are at the highest levels, participation is always possible. Similarly, those at the lowest level of civilization, the village dwellers, did not feel the effects as greatly. But those who were in the middle realized that the promise of citizenship in the world had a darker side, which was the loss of roots, deracination, and alienation. Now, when we look at the developments in Hellenistic religion and philosophy during this period, we can see that they were responding to these new social realities, what might be called the sociology and the psychology of empire. Although the traditional civic religious festivals remained central and popular, and the Olympic pantheon remains active and will continue to do so for hundreds more years, new aspects of Greek religion emerge. Chance, tike, and fate, hemarmene, now emerge as divine forces, inexorable forces, superior to the gods themselves. They begin to develop religious associations and mystery cults that offer salvation from such fate and chance, as well as a place in the world. And so we find people seeking initiation not only into the ancient agricultural cults located outside of Athens and Eleusis, but into many new cults from the East offering salvation. Philosophy, in turn, shifts from a concentration on theory to therapy. No philosophers are writing about the perfect state or the republic. Why do that in a world run by empire? Rather, they turn to how to be a good person in an alienating world. The philosopher is the doctor of the soul. Philosophical teaching is a form of therapy to teach how to be a virtuous person in a world that has run amok. Philosophical schools, the Pythagoreans and the Epicureans above all, offer an organized form of life, a community life, which provides sound teaching, sound practice, the opportunity to live in a face-to-face community of moral integrity in the middle of a world that makes little sense. And philosophy focuses on the cultivation of virtue and the healing of the soul. Among the philosophers, there was an effort, especially by the Stoics, to initiate an allegorical interpretation of the classic myths to save them for moral instruction. The myths of Homer, for example, are filled with stories about the gods that are scarcely edifying. How could they be read to shape paideia, that is, Greek culture, in a world in which virtue is no longer being supported by social structures? Allegorical interpretation was introduced in order to find a moral teaching in tales that appeared to report only immoral behavior. Such allegorical interpretation will be taken over by Judaism and will be taken over by Christianity. It is a very important development in the philosophy of this era. The Roman contribution to Mediterranean culture was more recent and for a long time more external and superficial. Rome established control over the Mediterranean in the 2nd century while still a republic, and continued its rule as a principate or an empire beginning with Caesar Augustus, whose dates are 27 before the Common Era to 14 of the Common Era, through a system of provincial governorships and prefects. During the time of Christianity's nascence, the empire was self-consciously Greek in its cultural outlook. Its literature and philosophy imitated Greek models. Cicero's Republic is quite self-consciously an imitation of Plato's Republic. And Greek tutors, who were slaves, were highly valued by the Romans. Thus, the Emperor Marcus Aurelius praises his Greek tutor. The Roman deities, furthermore, were merged syncretistically with the Greeks, so that Zeus had as his equivalent Jupiter. Practices of sexuality, especially male bisexuality, were taken over by Romans from Greece, although with very different social valences. Within the empire, safe provinces, such as Asia Minor, were governed by the Senate, while dangerous provinces, such as Palestine, were ruled by Rome directly through military prefects. Rome's conquest of territory and its securing of safe boundaries, as against the Parthians to the east, was a constant Roman concern. A byproduct of conquest was slavery, which grew enormously under the Romans and led to revolts like that of Spartacus in the years 73 to 71 before the Common Era. The Spartacus revolt had a tremendous impact on the Roman psyche because it seemed to threaten the very structure of society. As a consequence, another byproduct of the military rule and expansion was a willingness to violently suppress local uprisings by the populace. Military colonies peopled by veterans and military encampments help secure internal order. Heavy taxation of the provinces enriched the city of Rome and helped pacify its huge and growing population. Roman rule did not please everyone. The Jews were in an almost continuous state of revolt between the years roughly 66 to 135 of the Common Era. But Rome's efficient order also had positive benefits for the new cult called Christianity. Its system of roads, the most extensive system of roads that existed anywhere before the 19th century, were meant for military and commercial use, but they also enabled travel and communication for a missionary religion through personal contact and letters. The so-called Pax Romana, the Roman peace, eliminated bandits by land and pirates by sea, making transportation by both safe and predictable. And the extension of citizenship in the city of Rome to members of the provinces increased commitment to Rome, but also extended the privileges of law more widely. The Christian religion was, within decades, more Gentile than Jewish in its population, which meant that from its earliest period it bore the traces of Mediterranean culture, Greek civilization, and Roman rule in its DNA.